I was on a commission in Pittsburgh to study the use of tasers. And tasers, are manufactured by Taser International, and the company reps, of course, came and gave us their dog and pony show.
David Harris is a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh. He's the author of Good Cops, The Case for Preventive Policing, and Profiles in Injustice, Why Racial Profiling Cannot Work. He spent a lot of his academic career studying police behavior, its consequences, and how to improve it. And a few years ago, at that meeting with representatives from Taser International, he got his first glimpse of a new piece of technology. One
of the reps was carrying a full box of gadgets and tools and so forth, and he takes it out, this one device out I'd never seen before. He says, "Hey, look at this." In that moment, I knew that this could be something that could have a strong positive effect on the day-to-day job of policing and improve police accountability for misconduct.
What was that device? We'll get to that in a minute, but for now, let's just say it wasn't a taser. The reason we're talking about it, the reason people all over the country are talking about police accountability and the relationship between police and their communities, well, that's because of a tragedy that recently unfolded in Missouri. You probably heard about it on the news.
Tonight, after another night of protest in the St. Louis suburbs, state police are moving in.
Now's the time for peace and calm on the streets of Ferguson.
It's now been about a month since Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri by police officer Darren Wilson. A month since the streets erupted, the police cracked down, and the nation started paying attention. Many people, millions of people, were shocked by the shooting of an unarmed 18-year-old boy, by the total lack of transparency or accountability by the police, and then by the military-style response to the protests. The images on television seemed like something beamed in from the Middle East, not a suburb of St. Louis. But for many black Americans, the reaction wasn't shock or surprise, it was frustration, even rage about a law enforcement system, a system that turns every interaction with police into a powder keg waiting to blow, a system that, like clockwork, results in the death of a black man at the hands of police, every few weeks or even days.
It wasn't a big deal to me personally. We see it all the time out here. It's California. So we see police brutality and police shootings all the time.
That's Terrance Stone. Terrance lives in San Bernardino County, east of Los Angeles, but he grew up in Pomona.
In Pomona, they would, pull us over, snatch us out of our cars, take us up in the mountains, beat us up, and leave us there. It's probably happening to somebody right now as we speak, somewhere in California. So it wasn't that, oh my goodness, how could they do that? It was like, man, there it goes again.
Brown's killing, like the killings of Eric Garner, John Crawford, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Dylan Taylor, those are all just from the last few weeks, by the way, are just the most visible part of a whole complex of problems in America. The militarization of law enforcement, racially segregated and undertrained police forces, racial profiling, stop and frisk, the prison industrial complex, it goes on, and it can seem overwhelming. But in the middle of all that, the crisis in Ferguson shined a spotlight on a little gadget that, with the right policies, could actually make a significant difference by itself. The same little gadget that so impressed David Harris.
And it was a little sort of a Bluetooth-style headset that you wear on your ear, and I put it on, and there was on a screen exactly what I was looking at.
In other words, it was a camera, a wearable camera. And just a few days ago, it was announced it's coming to Ferguson.
Police officers in Ferguson, Missouri have begun wearing body cameras following the fatal shooting of unarmed teen Michael Brown. The news comes as the practice is gaining support across the country. Some are calling it the future of policing.
Police body cameras. Gimmick or actually a thing? Today we will find out. We'll talk to David Harris about the science and practice of these things. We'll talk to Terrance Stone, who's had a front row seat as the nearby town of Rialto, California became the first city in America to give body cameras on police a serious try. On this episode, the rise of a gizmo that in its way could be more important even than the Apple Watch. and might be coming soon to a city and a cop near you. Episode 32 of The Good Fight starts now. The Good Fight is powered by our sponsor and partner MoveOn.org Political Action, which is fighting to save the Senate in the 2014 elections and which notes that this is not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. I'm very pleased to announce that on a personal, or I guess professional note, I myself have just been named the Washington director of MoveOn.org, a role that I'm taking on in addition to hosting this program. So I urge you to join me and the 8 million MoveOn members across the country in the 2014 election battle, or by starting a petition at our website, which I can't remember the website, but if you Google moveon.org, I'm sure that you can find it. So video cameras probably don't sound like such an amazing innovation. You're probably listening to this podcast on a video camera that is also a phone or a computer. But body-mounted police cameras are a little different.
These are very small but very capable cameras that can be mounted on a collar of a uniform, on a tie, or most commonly as a sort of like a Bluetooth earpiece. They wirelessly send all the images and sound collected to a device that is clipped onto the officer's belt. And that device, at the end of the shift, is plugged into another machine, a computer, and all the audio and video recording is downloaded into a remote server and kept off-site, so it cannot be tampered with. These devices first came on the scene for law enforcement in the UK, and I've watched as use has expanded slowly across the United States.
Now, things are a little different in the US than they are in the UK on several fronts. For example, regular police in the UK don't carry guns. But body cameras are exactly the sort of high-tech thing that Americans love. The question about these cameras is, what's their actual impact? Do they actually make things better? And the fascinating thing is, in this case, we actually have some real evidence.
Just this past couple of years, we began to get real solid studies indicating how these things performed. The one I generally point people to is the study that was conducted by the police department in Rialto, California. This is a police department that is roughly the same size as the police department in Ferguson. And the chief in that department was very open to research and had a very strong interest in seeing if these body-worn cameras could make a difference for his police department.
This is something that's changing the face of law enforcement. People tend to behave a little bit better when they know they're on camera.
That's Tony Farrar, the police chief in Rialto, California, speaking to CBS News. Rialto was the first city in America to equip all its officers with body cameras. But it didn't do it all at once. Chief Farrar was behind the decision to do something that doesn't happen too often in law enforcement agencies, a scientific experiment.
They designed a real honest-to-God, rigorous study. Not just we had a bunch of officers try it and they liked it, but they placed officers with and without cameras on the same shift, in the same areas.
So this was a randomized controlled trial, right? This is like some people were assigned to the treatment, some assigned to the control. It was like they were testing the effects of fertilizer on peas, but it was cameras on cops.
Right, and this happens far too infrequently in law enforcement. The results were astounding. I don't think that's too strong a word. In Rialto, the use of the cameras brought down citizens' complaints against police by almost 90% and brought down the use of force by the police by about 60%.
February 13th of 2011 through February 12th of 2012, we had 24 officer complaints. For the following year, we had 3. It's about an 87.5%, almost an 88% reduction.
Those are incredible numbers. We don't know yet if we're going to see them replicated at that level, and as these cameras move into larger police departments, if they will be just as effective. But even if they were half as effective as that, at those two things, it would still be incredible.
So what's happening here? To understand it, you have to look at the world from both perspectives in a police interaction. First, the perspective of the cops. Police officers all have stories about being hassled on the job by the public, being yelled at, lied to, attacked, and then being hit with bogus complaints about their behavior. And if you think about it, even in the best case scenario, it's pretty much par for the course. A police officer's job is to show up when something is going seriously wrong, to interact with people in extreme distress. But if someone an officer is talking to knows that he's being video recorded, it affects his behavior. And cops like that.
They were quite good at having a sort of civilizing effect. In other words, when folks knew that the police were recording, they tended to behave a little bit better on the other side of the camera.
But the flip side is also true. Let's say you don't trust police. Then you want cops to wear cameras because when an officer knows that a camera is recording, when he knows that everything he says or does might one day be played back in a court of law, well, that changes the cop's behavior too.
All of my early experiences with law enforcement, it was all negative. I can't remember a positive interaction with law enforcement. I grew up in the inner city community. Law enforcement didn't come there to be friendly or hang out. They always came for a purpose. If you see them driving up and down the street, they were either looking for somebody, or looking for a situation.
That's Terrance Stone again, who you met earlier. He grew up in a community with a lot of gangs, not a lot of opportunity, and a police force that he never felt was on his side. One encounter with the police particularly stuck with him.
I remember a particular one when I was younger, I think probably middle school. My mother, she had gave me some money to go school shopping, so I caught the bus to the mall, went and got my clothes and caught the bus back. And I remember law enforcement, it was the sheriff department, where they stopped me as I was just walking with my bags in my hand, and they proceeded to, address me, put my hands on the car, where are you coming from, started looking through my clothes, asked me where I get these clothes from, did I steal them? They were throwing my clothes in the dirt. I already had a shaky relationship with law enforcement, but that situation, it put so much rage and hate against me just in law enforcement, because I was really just treated very harshly, and I felt like for nothing.
That's the kind of thing someone in power only does to a teenager if they think they have total impunity, where they know that if anyone complains, it'll be the police's word against some kids. For Terrance, it made clear which side of the law he was on.
I was in gangs for 15 years. I spent 10 of that in and out of correctional institutions. I went to California Youth Authority when I was 16 years old, for attempted murder on a police officer.
About 14 years ago, he got out of prison for the final time, and he started a program to help kids find better paths than the one he got on as a teenager. His organization, the Young Visionaries Youth Leadership Academy, now works with thousands of kids a year in cities including Rialto.
Now my relationship with law enforcement is not strained at all. I'm really good friends with lieutenants and chiefs, so I communicate better with law enforcement. I start looking at the person instead of the job, because I can't help these kids get off the street without a relationship with law enforcement, because law enforcement would probably be responsible for taking some of the kids off the street. Now I'm vice chair of the countywide Gangs and Drugs Task Force, so I have to interact with them on a positive level to be able to get things done and be able to help these kids get off the streets.
What's Chief Farrar like, the police chief in Rialto?
He's very engaging in the community. He's always out and about in the community at different events and trying to think outside of the box with the Rialto Police Department to get the PD in sync with the community. So he's out, racking his brain and trying to find different ways where he can make a better department out there.
Do you remember hearing about the camera plan, like when it was first being introduced or tested? Like, what did you think of it when you first heard about it?
I thought it was was good, actually, because, like, okay, if I pull you over, I have to respect your rights while I'm pulling you over because of these cameras. I think that all law enforcement should have to wear a camera, so let the public see, okay, this is what happened from beginning to end. And also, I think that if they do something negative, they should have to face the consequences for that also.
What they reported was that complaints about police behavior went down, but also the police's use of force went down a lot when they had the cameras on them. Does that sort of accord with your sense of what's changed since they started using cameras in Rialto?
Yeah, most definitely, because I think that because now they know that they're being watched. Matter of fact, super watched, because you have this camera on you all day. So you're gonna have to really account. You can't change the story up. You can't write a different report of what happened. What happened is what happened, and the camera is gonna tell you what happened. So I think that has a lot to do with it. That's why I think all of law enforcement should wear cameras. Then they'll be not as fast to shoot or do anything else, because of the cameras.
Have you ever dealt with a police officer who was wearing a camera?
No, but I wish I had in the past.
How would it have changed your life if police had been wearing a camera when they dealt with you?
I think that would have helped me out, and a lot of other kids my age too that grew up around me. Like even the incident with the police department threw my clothes in the dirt. I don't think that would have happened and would have just raised all this, like, okay, now it's me against you guys thing that I had half of my life.
That's the interesting thing about cameras. It's not so much what they do record, it's what doesn't happen because they're recording.
When things go better, nothing happens. When the situation is calmer, when the citizen is more satisfied the police officer doesn't use force that he or she might have otherwise, those are the situations where we don't have an arrest and we don't have a complaint and we don't have a crime.
They say nobody gets credit for the disaster that's prevented.
Yeah, exactly, because it was prevented. We have a little difficulty imagining the counterfactual world when things go just fine and there's no crisis. We don't make a big deal of that.
When something does go wrong, when police do use force and the community does complain that it was unwarranted, police cameras don't actually have a perfect track record for clearing things up. The footage is often confusing. If Darren Wilson had been wearing a camera when he shot Michael Brown, maybe we'd know exactly what happened, but maybe it would still be murky. The real win is preventing the tragedies in the first place. It's extraordinary how, in a situation with zero trust on either side, police cameras seem to appeal to everyone, cops and communities alike. But they're not a silver bullet. It's not just whether you have the cameras, it's how you use them, what policies you have in place. For example, you have to make sure cops can't just turn the cameras off if they want to do something illegal.
Yes, this is a very good question, and it brings us to an important caveat on these. If we want these things to be not only to serve police well, but to serve the public well, we must have rules about how they're used. It has to be department policy that every time you encounter a member of the public, certainly in public areas, these things go on. Now, what could make police officers do this? You have to attach a consequence or a further rule that if there's a complaint, a court case, whatever, in the aftermath of some encounter, and there was no recording, in that event, if there's no recording, then the presumption is against the officer and what the officer said. So if somebody comes forth with a complaint like that, he said, here's what happened, I couldn't believe it, and this is a department equipped with cameras, and there's no recording, whether it's an internal disciplinary matter or a lawsuit or whatever, the presumption has to be that since there's no reason for no recording, that the citizen is telling the truth.
So potentially that would really flip the normal court dynamic where the officer's word automatically carries more weight. Like the person making the accusation would have a legally stronger hand if there's no video.
I think we're approaching that point right now. I mean, recording has become so ubiquitous in everyday life that people now expect to see a video. I mean, they've seen that so much on television, they expect it. Where is it? And with cameras proliferating here, there, and everywhere, there's going to be more and more questioning, how come the police didn't record this?
You know, the NRA has this slogan, an armed society is a polite society, with the idea that if everyone's carrying guns, we'll all be nice to each other. That doesn't necessarily work out that well in theory. And you seem to basically be suggesting that a camera-wearing society is a polite society. Would George Orwell, do you think, be into this solution to police problems?
I get your point. I'm not sure I want to live in a society where everybody is videotaping everybody else. When I see Google Glass and I imagine that as a sort of everyday thing worn by many, many people, I get the willies, honestly. Police are called into non-public areas all the time. And could be private activities of taking place in some of those areas. There could be children present. There could be victims of crime. And there are real issues with how we deal with privacy. So we want to make sure that we protect ourselves even as we roll this technology out. There are ways to do it. There are rules we can craft. We're not powerless to do that. But I think what we see at this point is that this is a tool that can serve a lot of good purposes and improve both behavior and accountability on the police side of the camera at the same time that it collects evidence and does some good things for police.
In the civil liberties world, that's basically the sense of it, that there are risks, real risks, but the right policies can mitigate them. And that's why the ACLU endorses body cameras for police with the right protections. It's why David Harris thinks they're almost inevitable.
So within 5 years, I think this will be the basic standard in the industry. This is the opportunity for police to do this on their terms, to get it right, and to show people that they don't have anything to hide. Same way that they've often said that to citizens. Well, if you have nothing to hide, why can't I search your car? Well, if you have nothing to hide in the interaction between your officers and citizens, why didn't you record? Why don't you have those cameras?
Adopting cameras won't make the deeper problems go away. And if they do prevent the next Michael Brown shooting, the next Ferguson, we'll never know it. But if Ferguson leads to body cameras being adopted across the country, well, in a very, very dark cloud, this might be a silver lining.
Houston's Chief Charles McClellan has asked for $8 million to put cameras on his city's 3,500 officers.
Philadelphia Police Department is considering adding body cameras to their officers on the streets. They're certainly not the first to do this, even in
Tonight, the Berkeley City Council will consider launching a review to see whether they should have officers wear video cameras. Supporters say
New York City Police Commissioner Bill Bratton says his department is also looking into those cameras.
So concludes episode 32 of The Good Fight. This episode, along with links and music credits, can be found at thegoodfight.fm/32. That's the number 32. Huge thanks to our team, associate producer Zach Young, production coordinator Hadam Helmi, and executive producer Susan Davis. Thanks also to our guests, Professor David Harris and Terrance Stone, head of Young Visionaries Youth Leadership Academy, and to our sponsor and partner, MoveOn.org Political Action. Get our next episode the moment it comes out. Hit the subscribe button on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. And if you love this show, post a review. Thanks to WEAC Radio 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. for airing us, to Progressive Congress in Washington, D.C. for hosting our studio, to Beth Wickler, my wife, to Mac Wickler, my son, to you, our amazing listeners. Email us, show@thegoodfight.fm. We love your email. Tweet at us, Team Good Fight, Facebook, Team Good Fight. I'm Ben Wickler, thanking you for being part of The Good Fight.